Why fools end up in power? Machiavelli's warning about leadership. That's the question at the heart of today's video. And it's one that's haunted humanity for centuries. Why do incompetent, arrogant, and even foolish people so often rise to the very top, while those who are truly intelligent, capable, and ethical get overlooked, silenced, or crushed? Think about it. From the boardroom to the presidency, from ancient empires to modern corporations, history is filled with examples of disastrous leaders who seemed the least qualified to rule, yet they were the ones who ended up shaping the destiny of millions. This isn't just a modern frustration. Machiavelli himself warned about it over 500 years ago. In The Prince, he revealed a hard truth. Power doesn't necessarily go to the wisest or the most capable. It goes to those who know how to appear strong, who can manipulate perception, and who can exploit the weaknesses of human psychology. But here's where it gets even darker. Modern psychology proves Machiavelli was right. The people most likely to rise to power often aren't the most intelligent. They're the most confident, the most ruthless, and often the most delusional about their own abilities. It's not competence that gets rewarded, it's certainty. Psychologists call this the Dunning-Kruger effect, the cognitive bias where the least competent people often overestimate themselves the most. And here's the twist. Their misplaced confidence is exactly what convinces others to follow them. Meanwhile, truly intelligent and capable people tend to hesitate, to question themselves, to acknowledge complexity, which makes them appear weaker in a world that craves simple, absolute answers. So the paradox is this. The very traits that make someone competent often hold them back from leadership, while the traits that signal incompetence, overconfidence, arrogance, refusal to self-reflect, become the keys to power. And when you combine this paradox with human psychology's craving for certainty and Machiavelli's insights into manipulation, you begin to understand why societies keep making the same mistake over and over again. We elevate fools and sideline the wise. This is not just theory. History is littered with examples. Emperors who burned cities to the ground while believing they were gods, CEOs who conned millions of dollars while projecting unstoppable charisma, and politicians who promised easy solutions to impossible problems. Different eras, same story. And here's the most disturbing part. This isn't an accident. It's a pattern. A predictable cycle Machiavelli mapped out long ago, and it's still unfolding today, right in front of us. To understand why fools so often end up in power, we need to return to the man whose name has become synonymous with political manipulation, Niccolò Machiavelli. Machiavelli wasn't just a philosopher. He was a political survivor. Living in Renaissance Italy, surrounded by corrupt popes, ruthless dukes, and warring city-states, he saw firsthand how fragile governments were, and how often they were ruled by people completely unfit to lead. In his most famous work, The Prince, Machiavelli stripped away the illusions. He didn't write about how leaders should behave. He wrote about how they actually gain and keep power. And what he discovered was deeply unsettling. According to Machiavelli, power doesn't flow to the smartest, or the most moral, or the most competent. It flows to the one who can control appearances. Think about that. Not reality, not truth, but appearance. A leader doesn't have to be just. They just have to look just. They don't have to be strong. They just have to project strength. They don't have to be wise. They just have to appear as if they have answers. Machiavelli even argued that it is often safer for a ruler to be feared than loved. Why? Because fear creates control, while love is fragile, unpredictable, and easily lost. This is the Machiavellian paradox. A foolish leader who masters the performance of confidence and control can outplay a wise leader who tells uncomfortable truths. And here's where modern psychology catches up to Machiavelli. Humans are wired to respond to certainty. When someone speaks without hesitation, with absolute conviction, we instinctively interpret it as authority, even if what they're saying is wrong, even if it's dangerously wrong. This explains why the arrogant, overconfident, and incompetent so often rise to leadership. They are willing to project certainty where intelligent people would hesitate. They are willing to speak in absolutes while the wise admit complexity. And in a world where people crave clarity and stability, the fool's confidence feels more reassuring than the truth-teller's doubt. Let's pause on that, because it's crucial. The wise hesitate, because they see all the angles. The competent reflect, because they understand the risks. The ethical restrain themselves, because they respect the cost of their actions. And what does that look like to the crowd? Weakness, doubt, indecision. Meanwhile, the fool barrels forward with blind certainty, and the crowd mistakes arrogance for leadership. History proves Machiavelli's point. Look at Emperor Nero of Rome. By all accounts, he was impulsive, paranoid, and dangerously unfit to rule. But he projected divine confidence, declared himself godlike, and silenced anyone who dared oppose him. The result? Rome burned, literally, while Nero played the role of untouchable leader. Or consider more modern examples. Charismatic CEOs who rise to power on bold promises and unshakable certainty, only to collapse their companies in scandal. Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos comes to mind. She wasn't a medical genius, but she mastered the appearance of certainty, of visionary brilliance. Investors and politicians followed, not because she was competent, but because she looked the part. This is Machiavelli's cold truth. In the game of power, appearance can outweigh reality. And once the wrong person ascends, their incompetence doesn't just stay with them. It cascades downward, shaping institutions, destroying lives, and leaving lasting scars on society. The lesson is brutal but necessary. Leadership selection is not about who is best for the role, but who can play the role most convincingly. And the fool, armed with arrogance, confidence, and the willingness to deceive, is often far more convincing than the thoughtful, ethical man who dares to admit he doesn't have all the answers. And so the cycle repeats. Fools rise, the wise retreat, and the people suffer. Machiavelli saw it in Florence. We see it today. Different centuries, same human weakness. If Machiavelli gave us the political blueprint for why fools end up in power, modern psychology shows us the mental machinery that makes it happen. Because this isn't just about corrupt kings or ruthless CEOs. It's about how the human mind is wired to reward the wrong people. The first and most infamous principle is the Dunning-Kruger effect. This phenomenon, discovered by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger in the 1990s, reveals something shocking. The less competent someone is, the more likely they are to overestimate their abilities. Picture it like this. The intelligent person sees complexity, admits what they don't know, and second-guesses themselves. The incompetent person? They don't see the complexity. They don't even realize what they don't know. And because of that blind spot, they project absolute confidence. Now here's the cruel twist. To outsiders, the confident fool looks more competent than the cautious expert. In interviews, in elections, in boardrooms, the one who knows for sure gets chosen, while the one who hesitates gets dismissed. The result? Leadership roles filled by the loudest, not the wisest. But the Dunning-Kruger effect is only one piece of the puzzle. Another powerful bias is overconfidence bias, the tendency for people to believe they're more capable, more skilled, or more knowledgeable than they really are. Studies show that the majority of people rate themselves as above average in intelligence, leadership, or driving skill, which is mathematically impossible. And those who are most delusional about their abilities are often the ones who push themselves forward into positions of authority. Combine this with the psychological craving for cognitive closure, the deep human need for certainty and simple answers, and you start to see the full picture. People don't want complexity. They don't want the truth that policies are complicated, that solutions take time, or that leadership requires humility. They want certainty. They want someone who will say, "I alone can fix this." And who delivers that? Not the thoughtful, cautious, competent leader, but the fool. The fool who oversimplifies. The fool who declares bold answers without hesitation. The fool who promises the impossible with unwavering confidence. This is why propaganda works. This is why populism thrives. This is why entire nations can fall in love with leaders who look strong but crumble under real challenges. The human brain, wired for shortcuts, prefers confidence over truth and certainty over accuracy. And there's another layer: narcissism. Many of the leaders we call fools aren't just incompetent. They are driven by narcissistic traits: entitlement, lack of empathy, hunger for admiration. And here's the dangerous irony. In competitive environments, narcissists often rise quickly. Their arrogance is mistaken for vision. Their manipulation is mistaken for charm. Their obsession with image is mistaken for leadership. But narcissism is a hollow engine. It burns bright and fast, but it cannot sustain. And when a narcissist reaches the top, they don't lead for the people, they lead for themselves. They surround themselves with weaker subordinates, they silence critics, and they create a culture of incompetence that infects the entire system. So let's recap the psychology. Dunning-Kruger ensures the incompetent project confidence. Overconfidence bias pushes them to chase leadership roles. Cognitive closure makes the public crave their simple answers. Narcissism fuels their rise and protects their ego at any cost. Put all of this together, and you realize the rise of the fool isn't an accident. It's a predictable outcome of human psychology and social dynamics. And Machiavelli saw it coming centuries ago. He warned us that power flows not to the most capable, but to those who appear capable. Psychology simply proves how our brains keep falling for the illusion. Here's the most dangerous truth about fools in leadership. Once they climb to the top, they don't just sit there. They reshape the system beneath them, and they reshape it in their own image. Think about it. A wise leader surrounds themselves with people smarter than they are, advisors who challenge their thinking, critics who keep them honest. But a foolish leader? They fear that. They see intelligence as a threat. They see criticism as betrayal. So instead of surrounding themselves with competence, they surround themselves with loyalty. And loyalty, in this context, means weakness. It means silence. It means agreeing, even when the ship is sinking. This creates what psychologists call the sycophant trap. The fool promotes those who flatter them, not those who challenge them. They reward obedience, not skill. They punish truth-tellers, and they elevate yes-men. Over time, the entire system becomes a mirror of the leader's incompetence. Now here's where Machiavelli's insight gets chilling. In The Prince, he wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." In other words, if you want to know whether a leader is wise or foolish, don't look at their speeches. Look at their court. Look at who they trust. Because fools attract fools, and wise leaders attract wisdom. But the corruption doesn't stop there. Once fools cement their inner circle, they also rewrite the rules of the game to ensure that only more fools can rise. Competent challengers are blocked, silenced, discredited, or forced out. The pipeline of leadership becomes clogged with mediocrity. This is how empires collapse. This is how corporations rot from the inside. This is how governments lose decades of progress in a single generation. Because once incompetence is institutionalized, reversing it becomes almost impossible without total collapse. And here's the tragic cycle. 1. Fools rise to power by projecting confidence. 2. They fear competence and push it away. 3. They reward loyalty over intelligence. 4. The system fills with weaker and weaker players. 5. Collapse becomes inevitable. History is littered with examples. Ancient Rome, where emperors silenced capable generals and instead trusted flatterers. Modern corporations where CEOs fire visionaries for disagreeing. Governments where leaders replace qualified officials with loyal cronies, and watch entire institutions fail under pressure. But here's the part most people miss. Fools in power rarely see themselves as fools. They see themselves as saviors. They rewrite history as they go, surrounding themselves with propaganda, convincing their followers that anyone who questions them is the enemy. And because they control the narrative, they can sustain the illusion of competence far longer than anyone expects. Until reality breaks through. Until the cracks can't be covered. Until the system they built, the system of sycophants and weaklings, fails them at the exact moment they need it most. That is the ultimate cost of foolish leadership. Not just personal failure, but systemic failure. And when systems fail, it's not just the fool who suffers. It's everyone beneath them.